The Tiger battle starts when the column of Sherman tanks are traveling a road, and out of nowhere, the last tank in the column takes a round through the side armor and is destroyed. The remaining tanks halt and back off the road while facing the direction the round came from. The Tiger fires again and misses, but it gives away its position and is called out as being 800 yards away. Remember that, because that's going to be important. The Shermans fire smoke and advance on the Tiger. Resolve that it has to be destroyed. When the Shermans fire, the rounds are deflected off the front armor of the Tiger. The Tiger targets a Sherman, fires, the round deflects and kills the tank commander. The second shot on that Sherman kills it. Methodically, the Tiger works its way from left to right, targeting the next Sherman between Fury and the destroyed tank. After a couple of rounds, it succeeds and destroys that tank as well, leaving it just Fury and the Tiger. It is now a race to the rear of the Tiger to shoot it where the armor is said to be weakest, while Fury misses the first shot and then rounds it back and lands 2 crippling blows on the Tiger, ending the battle. Now, could that have happened? Simply put, maybe. Let's go over some details first. 2 of the 3 Sherman tanks that fight the Tiger have been upgraded from the smaller 75mm main gun to the bigger and more powerful 76mm main gun. This change occurred because, while effective as an infantry support variant, the 75mm gun was useless in armored combat against the heavily armed and heavily armored German tanks. Prior to the change, when the 75mm Shermans encountered a Tiger, they would either have to make a mad dash to the rear of the tank and put rounds through it at a very close range, usually suffering staggering losses, or they would have to pull back and call in air support or an M10 tank destroyer. In tank-on-tank combat, the 75mm Shermans just did not have the muscle to compete at even standard engagement ranges, and at the maximum range of the Tiger at 2,200 yards, or approximately 2,000 meters, the 75mm was completely and totally useless, and as a result, the 76mm gun was implemented. The higher velocity gun was capable of scoring a penetrating blow to the hull of a Tiger at normal combat ranges like in the film, which means in theory the 2 76mm Shermans could have taken out the Tiger at range without ever closing in. The M62 round was capable of penetrating just over 4 inches of armor at nearly 2,000 yards, and the HVAP, or high velocity armor piercing round, was capable of piercing 7 inches of armor at the same range. With that said, the HVAP rounds were in short supply due to material shortages for manufacturing. So, of the rounds that were produced, most of them were done to fit the 76mm gun of the M10 tank destroyer, and not the 76mm gun of the M4A3E8 Sherman. So amongst tank crews, the HVAP rounds were rare, and tanks never had more than a couple at any one time, if they got any at all. We forget that was a time when the entire world was at war with each other for years, and without the massive mining machines of today, materials could run short, so it cannot be written as Fury or the other 76mm tank could have easily taken out the Tiger at range using the HVAP round, because it is not assured that either of them had one or more of those rounds. The HVAP round would not have mattered in this instance. Remember how I told you that the M62 round at nearly 2,000 yards could penetrate just over 4 inches of armor? Now remember how I told you that the called out range in the film was 800 yards? That is well inside the effective range of the M62, and because it's so close, it could potentially give it more penetrative power. Now, with all that said, the frontal armor of the Tiger was just under 4 inches. The side and rear armor for both the turret and the hull varied from 2.5 inches to a little over 3 inches. That means that Fury, using the M62 round, which is clearly pictured in the film when the smoke round is grabbed, could not only have taken out the Tiger at the initial range of 800 yards with a frontal hull impact, but also as they closed in, it could have taken out the Tiger with an impact to the side of the hull or the side of the turret, with the hull likely giving the best chance of penetration due to the curved side of the turret, meaning that Fury and the column of Shermans would never have had to advance on the Tiger at all, much less to the extent of having to get to the rear of the tank when they were carrying rounds that could have taken out the tank at range. Tiger fans, loyal as they are, have a couple of criticisms. One of them being the greatest, but we'll save that one for last. Firstly, the Tiger fans criticize that the Tiger engaged the last vehicle in the column of Shermans. They also criticize that the Tiger advanced towards the Shermans rather than waiting there or even increasing the distance between them and the Shermans by reversing. And finally, the biggest complaint. The Tiger scored a glancing blow on the side armor of Fury, knocking off the logs and gashing the armor before deflecting. Tiger tank fans cite that at that range, the very powerful 88mm main gun of the Tiger would have penetrated the side of Fury and more than likely gone out the other side. Logs or no logs. Battle over. Starting with the first two, the tank targeted in the column and the advancing of the Tiger, opposed to holding position or reversing. Both of those can be cited to the fact that it was late in the war. German tank crews were more than likely inexperienced, as the experienced ones were probably already lost in battle. Holding position and reversing is something that we will come to in a moment, but it is worth noting that while Panther and Tiger tanks did perform off-road better than earlier tanks, especially on soft terrain like mud, the M4A3E8 Sherman of Fury did have wide tracks to remedy that issue, and Shermans were faster tanks, so reversing would not have likely been overly effective at keeping the Shermans from reaching the rear. Again, not that they had to, but the glaring issue is that side impact on Fury. The 88mm gun of the Tiger was a far superior gun than that of the Sherman tank, and that superior gun had a reputation of being devastatingly good at knocking out Shermans. Logs or no logs, I would agree that the likelihood of that round deflecting like it did is probably not great. And I'm not entirely sure of the effectiveness of logs as added protection against the 88. If I had to give a reason for the lack of penetration at that range, it would be pure speculation, but it would probably cite that it was late war, and as with any mass-produced items, there are defective ones, and Fury could have been up against a round that didn't get enough propellant, thus it didn't perform as it should have. However, whether or not the logs assisted in that or not, I would say it was added distance between the round and the interior of the tank, so could this have happened? But it's unlikely that a scenario would play out like depicted. As always with war, there's 1,000 ways things could play out. But in this case, there are too many reasons that it wouldn't play out like depicted. While it is true that Shermans would use their superior speed and maneuverability to get a clean shot at the rear of a Tiger, and that point tactic usually resulted in staggering losses, it was a real tactic. However, with the addition of the 76mm gun of Fury and one other Sherman in that platoon, and the known fact that Fury did have some M62 APC rounds, it is just not likely that an experienced tank crew like that of Fury would not have known the capability of their tank, despite the fact that they probably have spent more time in the 75mm Sherman, as an upgrade to 76mm was a late war development. Facts are that the controversial Tiger shot to the thin side armor of Fury should have never happened, as Fury and the other tank in the platoon had the firepower, the ammunition, the range, and the numbers to knock out the Tiger. Let me be clear, they would have been able to hit and destroy the Tiger long before the point where it put a round into Fury's side armor. It is made very clear that the crew of Fury is a veteran tank crew and have been fighting since the beginning. Therefore, I certify this as plausible, but unlikely. The final thoughts are that the scene is not realistic, not because the Shermans won or even because the side impact of Fury, but because the Shermans should not have ever had to attack the Tiger in a charge. It seems as if they wanted to demonstrate the tactic for a dramatic and pulse-pounding moment in a film, but it undercuts the narrative that the Fury crew is an experienced crew, and it flies in the face of the facts that the 76mm gun and the M62 round could have taken out that Tiger at the 800 yards. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you have thoughts on this scene? Is there a scene you would like me to analyze?